Did you know that countries located north of the equator line are much richer than those in the south? It doesn't take a lot to figure that out, right? After all, Europe, the US, and Canada are all located there. But is there a specific explanation for this phenomenon? Well, turns out there's more than one possible explanation, and today we'll go over all of them. So Alexers, stick around to learn the most probable reasons why countries in the Northern Hemisphere are richer than their southern siblings. Welcome to ALUX. Okay, so before we dive into the reasons proper, we should take a minute to establish what is considered part of the Northern Hemisphere and what is in the South. Okay, so the two hemispheres are divided by the equator, which is the circle of latitude around our planet. There isn't a literal circle or line, of course, but this concept is used to establish the point of 0-degree latitude on our planet. The Northern Hemisphere houses all of North America and Europe, as well as large portions of Asia and Africa. It also contains the northern part of South America. Then, south of the equator, we have the entirety of Australia and Antarctica, most of South America, and a portion of Africa and Asia. This should give you a pretty good idea of which countries are considered part of the Northern Hemisphere and which are in the South. Alright, so now let's move on to some theories. Number 1. Geography. While there isn't any kind of connection between the potential of an individual and the place they live in the world, the same cannot be said for the potential of different territories on our planet. One of the advantages of the Northern Hemisphere over the Southern one is just how much land is available in comparison, and the amount of resources and development potential for this land. For instance, the Northern Hemisphere accounts for 68% of the land on our planet, while the Southern Hemisphere only has a meager 32%. The rest is all water. The Northern Hemisphere's surface is 60.7% water, while the South's is 80.9%. On top of that, the largest desert in the world, Antarctica, is located in the Southern Hemisphere. So of the little land available to the South, a decent portion has much less than a practical use. And yes, Antarctica technically is a desert, but that's a discussion for a different type of channel. Moving on. The Northern Hemisphere also has a significantly higher population than the Southern one. Okay, we're selling this short here. The North houses 90% of all human population, while the South contains the remaining 10%. This again is connected to the idea that the North has more land that can be used for the purpose of development, agriculture, and settlements, and the two most populated countries in the world, China and India, are located north of the equator. But land alone isn't the only factor for the development potential of a location. There are other things to consider as well, such as number 2, better climate conditions. The climate of the countries within both hemispheres has dictated a lot when it comes to how these countries have developed. This is mainly related to agriculture, which tends to thrive more in temperate climates. The temperate climate zones are located around the middle latitudes north and south of the equator. They have wider temperature ranges, which is why you see the stereotypical seasons in them. But not all countries. The tropics, for example, tend to have a more fixed climate. Soils in temperate climates are generally better for agriculture than other climates, as they have higher levels of nutrients. The temperatures are also warmer and not strictly hot or cold all year round. When you're harvesting crops, the better the temperature, the higher the yield you'll get. This means that countries in this temperate climate zone get better results for less effort when harvesting crops that benefit from this climate, like wheat. And once again, a trend reemerges. The Northern Hemisphere has a vast amount of land located within the temperate climate zone, including vast portions of North America and Europe, while the Southern Hemisphere has Chile, Uruguay, and New Zealand. Now, the effect of climate on agriculture and other industries has been lessened over time. As technology evolves, we find new ways to get past such obstacles, but we have to remember that agriculture has been a dominant commercial industry for much of our history, and the evolution of technology to the degree we see today is much more recent. You don't have to go back too far either. Agriculture was the world's top employment sector back during the days of our grandparents. So not only do you have more usable land and more people to work it, but you also have better climate conditions that allow you to reap more benefits from it. Number 3. Disease burden. Another factor that affects populations south of the equator, which is also related to climate, is a higher burden of disease. When you get sick, you're not able to work, so it stands to reason that countries that have more issues with illnesses will have a harder time than countries where diseases are less of a factor. Take malaria and other mosquito-borne illnesses like Zika virus or dengue, for example. These diseases are far more common in countries closer to the equator line due to the hotter and wetter climates, like the tropics and a lot of countries south of the equator. But not only mosquitoes, ticks and fleas also thrive in the type of weather conditions that are more prevalent south of the equator. Now, that's not to say that there aren't diseases and insects in the northern hemispheres, but the problem with using diseases as a comparison point is that part of the reason why they affect the south so disproportionately is their poorer infrastructure, lack of access to clean water, and higher poverty rates. But a lot of countries in the south are, for lack of a better term, younger than those in the north, which leads us to our next point. Number 4. Moving from primary goods to manufactured goods. As we've established, there's far less land in the south, and what land there is requires more people working on it to yield the same level of results that you can get from land in the north. This is one of the reasons why the southern hemisphere countries still have more people working on agriculture than their northern counterparts. So you have a comparatively smaller population devoting more time to agriculture than other efforts, such as technological development. This is one of the reasons why northern countries have widened the gap over time. As their technology improved, they were able to move away from focusing entirely on agriculture and producing primary goods to creating manufactured goods. You see, as a country develops, they rely on the production of primary goods for their economy. We're talking about food and raw materials here. However, after they've secured enough production of these goods or have made the process of their production efficient enough, they start to move into goods that are manufactured from these raw materials. For example, while a primary good-based economy might make money from agriculture, mining, and lumber, a manufactured good economy can turn those materials into things like tools, furniture, and specialty foods, things that go on to carry a higher price tag. Number 5. Time to develop. A good reason why these countries were able to move away to manufactured economies is they've had more time to develop. This tips the balance in the favor of the North because southern countries haven't had as much time to develop. Let's not forget that a lot of the technological revolutions that spurred the modern world came from countries in the North. The Industrial Revolution, one of the biggest technological leaps in recent history, began in Europe. Since the Northern Hemisphere countries have had access to better technological improvements for longer, they've been able to take advantage of this to push their riches more and more. As we mentioned earlier, this development is what allowed them to move away from primary goods-based economies and into manufacturing economies. This gained them a lot of independence and leverage when it comes to negotiations, and they started buying from countries that relied on production of primary goods and then turned them into manufactured goods, which creates a loop that made these southern countries kind of dependent on the North. And speaking of, Number 6. Dependency. The final point in our video is the feedback loop of dependency and riches that exists between northern and southern hemisphere countries. Although, to be fair, this has become more of a factor in recent human history. You see, as we already know, there are a lot more countries with economies based around manufactured goods in the north than in the south. One benefit of manufactured items is their price is not directly related to how much it costs to make them. In fact, their raw material cost is usually only a tiny portion of their cost. This is not the case with primary goods, where the price to produce them and the price they're sold at are not that far apart. So you have a situation where a country has more resources and money than the other and relies on selling goods that have a higher profit margin. The developed country can then buy the primary goods from the developing country and then sell them their manufactured goods. It's clear that one country benefits more from this transaction than the other, but developing countries don't have much of an option in the matter. The more resources and materials rich countries buy from poor countries, the more goods they can manufacture and sell. This creates a loop where rich countries keep making more money and buying more goods, while poor countries don't get to develop much as a result. Sure, they're also making money from these transactions, but the prices of primary goods and resources don't have the same profitability of manufactured goods. Luxury goods like smartphones, computers, and TVs increase in price based on demand, much more significantly significantly than their base materials do. So the rich country earns more money from selling manufactured goods, which allows them to buy more materials to produce more. Their people benefit from this economic boom, which allows them to buy more stuff. And as they buy more, prices increase, and so on and so forth. And so the rich countries continue to invent and sell newer and more manufactured goods, while the raw industry is far more stable as far as people go. You don't buy more food with more money, you buy more things. Ultimately, it's hard to tell for sure what's the reason for this disparity between both hemispheres. While there's a lot of theories we can point toward, such as geography and climate factoring into the development potential, as well as the time span of development between countries in both hemispheres, none of them offers a definitive answer. There's of course always the chance this is mostly a coincidence, correlation instead of causation, but it doesn't look likely. It's more probable that this is due to a combination of all theories that we've seen as opposed to a single definitive one, but we guess only time will tell. So, to wrap all of this up, the true Aluxers know we always close with a bonus, and here's yours for today. Did you know the seasons are kind of flipped in the southern hemisphere? While winter takes place between December and March in the north, it happens between June and September in the south. The same thing happens with summer going on between December and March in the south. Better remember that next time you travel. And if you already knew that because it's kinda easy, here's another difference between the two. Due to the Coriolis effect, hurricanes and tropical storms rotate clockwise in the southern hemisphere, and in the north, they rotate counterclockwise.